how long does it take you to brush your teeth? Well, you have to start by brushing the front of your teeth. You go to the sides, and then you struggle sometimes with those teeth towards the end, right? And you just can't help but think about that piece of meat that's stuck in between your teeth. Then you have to clean your tongue, even though sometimes we forget about our tongue. And then you're there, rinsing your mouth. Sometimes we may even get the urge to play with water inside our mouth, but it feels so fresh. Well, during the time that it took you to brush your teeth, a child under 5 died of diarrhea. That's how long it takes. Every 60 seconds, a child dies from a preventable and treatable disease. A significant portion of diarrheal disease can be prevented through safe drinking water and adequate sanitation and hygiene. So what 3 things are essential to your health? Water, sanitation, and hygiene, or what we call WASH. Today, over 3 billion people worldwide are trapped in a cycle of poverty and disease because they lack access to safe and sufficient drinking water, basic sanitation, and hygiene. Having access to WASH is essential to living a life in dignity and upholding human rights. Yet over 3 billion people still do not have these fundamental rights. That is half of humanity. That it's 1 out of every 2 of you. But it is even more alarming. Sometimes we forget that most of the water that we have in the planet is salt water. Out of all the water in the world, less than 3% is fresh water. And of that fresh water, 68.9 is frozen in glaciers, 30.8 is underneath the earth as groundwater, and only 0.3 is readily available. And this very tiny portion is not always that fresh. This is the portion that is available for human consumption, 0.3. And this is the proportion that is threatened the most by natural and man-made contaminants. So waterborne diseases that are caused by known microorganisms are barely at the tip of the iceberg. What is below the iceberg, it's what is more critical. We still do not have effective treatment in many parts of the world for many contaminants, such as many pharmaceuticals and metals. What about neglected tropical diseases that are on the rise in many countries? Poor water quality of the limited resources we have affects the water quantity because we cannot reuse the water. It costs more to treat polluted rivers for drinking, agriculture, and bathing. Yet every day, we continue to pour millions of tons of untreated sewage and industrial and agricultural waste into our world's water systems, creating a heavy burden on communities. So when we take into account water quality, there's much less than the 0.3 of the fresh water available. To address this problem, as well as many other critical issues around the world, the international community has adopted the target that we know, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Goal number 6 calls for the world to achieve universal equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. It also calls for adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all, and end open-defecation once and for all. But we need talented individuals to reach this goal. However, the reality is that universal and safe wash coverage by 2030, it's not achievable with the current global human resources. We need more people. A recent study by the International Water Association found that we're still lacking 787,000 trained water and sanitation professionals to reach this universal watch coverage. So what you see in gray in these graphs is the people that we're missing. And this is only based on countries who have data to assess this. Imagine what the true picture would be if we included countries that lack data on human capacity. So not only are we lacking in trained WASH individuals, but many of them have challenges accessing the wealth of knowledge that we have collected and analyzed in this sector. Now, picture these books at the top as the global WASH knowledge available. Everything that in theory we need to know about how to get clean water and good health. And people have to get to them to obtain the knowledge. Closest to the books, we have the WASH researchers. These are the people who do scientific research, the universities and think tanks, where access to WASH resources, the knowledge and learnings, it's easily accessible. Then we have the WASH specialists. These are international agencies, large funders, and government entities. Sometimes they have difficulty assessing all of the data that is available. Further away from the books, we have the WASH project managers. These are international NGOs at country level, local NGOs, social enterprises, and the local government. But the furthest away from the books are the community workers, who are the people on the ground interacting with community members to create change. The furthest away from the learnings where the knowledge should be trickling down easily. I'd like to tell you about TJ. He lives in the Pemon indigenous community in one of the most isolated regions in the world, in the Canaima National Park in Venezuela. He started becoming very ill when his body was covered in blisters. So one day, he went to see a rural doctor who was the person who shared this story with me. He walked many kilometers under the sun with his blisters, barefoot, in the jungle. And when he got there, not even the doctor could figure out what was happening. Little did he know that he was drinking mercury from the river next to a mine where people use mercury to extract gold. He did not know the link between mercury and his health. And even the scientific community is barely beginning to understand now the relationship between mercury and pemphigus foliaceus. To find ways to reach universal and safe WASH coverage by 2030, we need to focus on bridging this larger gap. Rotary can, because of the large network of people we have throughout the world. Just look around here. This is amazing. We all seem to recognize that capacity building needs to happen. And yet we consistently fail to put enough resources towards it. To really bridge this education gap, we must focus on 4 things: invest, measure, network, and empower. First, we have to keep investing in WASH education, particularly in developing countries, in 2 ways: through WASH education programs, like the WASH in Schools programs, and through global grant scholarships. Let's create innovative knowledge practitioners who are willing to bring WASH knowledge from the top of the chain to the community workers. I am an example of your investment. Rotary invested in my graduate research in Brazil. This has led to the development of scientific publications and a much-needed international research collaboration. But it made me a WASH advocate with passion, which brought me to you today. It made me passionate about working in WASH education to lessen this gap. I'd like to tell you now about Pius, the man in the center of this picture. Pius had to carry 20 liters of water in his head 5 times a day while in school. Just a week ago, he reminded me of the day when he was playing with a friend in his school, and the next day he was burying him because of typhoid. And he thought this was normal until a teacher told him, "Heads are not meant to carry water. They are made for us to think." Many years later, he became the project manager of a WASH in Schools program, where he spent countless of hours talking to the children about washing their hands. This is the hardest part of education, the behavioral changes. The children now want to be like him because they associate him with health. Rotary invested in him, and he's now a role model for these children. That's what we need. Dedicating time to others has infinite value. The man in this picture is called Francis. Francis also fetched water when he was young. He would wake up every day and walk 1 kilometer to a swamp to fill his clay pot. When he was 11 years old, he noticed blood and mucus in his feces and spent 10 days in the hospital. He had dysentery, and he thought this was normal. After 50 years, he wrote a proposal to a Rotary club to create a WASH program for his school. And he's now spending countless of hours implementing the education program. And this is not only in the school that he attended, but in 30 schools in his community. This is the power of dedicating time to others. We can use our talents to be involved in education rather than just being donors. If you're a Rotarian teaching in primary schools, you know how to structure curriculums. If you're a journalist, you know how to write publicity for WASH projects. If you're on the ground with the beneficiaries, focus on hands-on practice instead of only focusing on knowledge acquisition or bringing an expert to talk about disease transmission. Let's empower each other. Let's just pause for a second and think about what you can do. What can you do? What can you do to help bridge this education gap? The second thing that we should focus on is to measure the need for human resources. When I visited the community of Caliciso, I was stunned to find that many girls dropped out of school due to a lack of menstrual hygiene management because they don't have sanitary pads, something that is so normal. But I was even more shocked to find that we don't know how many of these girls do not reach secondary education. There is very little data available on the human capacity for water and sanitation services. But Rotarians are on the ground. They're in the places where WASH professionals are needed. We can measure, and we can do it through our global network. The third thing that we should focus on is to network. This is Joseph. He's also Ugandan. When I met him, he was already a Rotarian. In 2 short weeks that I visited his community, I only got to go to 10 out of the Terry schools he wanted to work on. So I panicked and I said, Joseph, how are we going to know what the nearest water source is to all these schools? They're all so far. How do we know what the real need is for WASH in these schools? It turned out that Joseph also worked for the Ministry of Water and the Environment in Uganda. He connected the program with district health inspectors who had all of this data. He connected the program with multiple Rotary clubs in the country. He also connected the program with a university, getting volunteers to help gather even more data in schools around the district. So by using the Rotary network and relationship, he connected people with passion towards a common goal. The fourth and most powerful thing we should focus on is to empower. This is Rachel in her village. She's measuring the water quality, and even though this is normal for her, she grew up not accepting that she would have to live with constant stomach pain because of water. When I met Rachel, she was shadowing health inspections. She wanted to learn more about water, but she felt that she didn't have enough resources. When she joined a Rotary WASH in Schools program, she realized that there was a need to test the water in each of the schools. So she became a district health inspector. And she pursued her education even further. She started to believe in herself. What struck me the most about Rachel is what she said to me one day. She said, Isis, you just, by standing here and talking to these people in my village, have empowered me in many more ways that you can imagine. To realize that I have the power to change things. You know, this was the first time that I learned the enormous impacts of my actions, and it wasn't too long ago. So let's empower each other to create meaningful change. Take the time to learn how you can use your skills in WASH today. Come to the breakout session later today. Thank you for what you do for Rotary. Safe and sufficient access to wash is a fundamental right for all, but we have to believe in it. So remember, invest, measure, network, and empower others to bridge the gap. If you care about ending hunger, you need clean water. If you care about peace and conflict resolution, you need clean water. If you care about ending polio, you need clean water. We need clean water to make the world a better place. Thank you.